Did you guys see the Divvy station getting installed outside this building today?
Basically, it's a new bike sharing system from the city of Chicago. Basically, there's a lot of blue bikes that are blanketing the city. Every single one of those bike stations. Okay. Alright. And so every single one of those bike stations is connected to the internet. And every minute it sends information to a server that lets us know how many bikes are available and how many open slots are available. And that's a public API that everyone can access. So 2 weeks ago, we came to this Hack Night for the first time, and we heard about this, and then we sort of thought, okay, well, Divvy bikes are cool, but when I'm in the city, one thing I want to know is how do I get from A to B, right? Using Divvy bikes. So we made an iPhone app where you can just enter start location and end location, and it'll tell you how to walk to the nearest Divvy bike station that has bikes available. It'll give you biking directions to the Divvy bike station closest to your destination that has a slot available, and then walking directions to your destination. So we'll show you what that looks like as soon as this gets configured.
Yeah.
While I was doing that, can I ask a
question
about those bike stands? Does every bike have a unique number? Does the stand know which bikes are in it?
Yeah. No, I think so. That's not a public. That information's not public yet. But I think that I think they said 2 weeks ago that they were maybe planning on releasing that information on not exact maybe individual bikes, but just which bikes are going where. That's a lot of information that would be really cool.
I mean, there are privacy concerns, obviously, but I was just
curious.
I was curious if the information was even there.
Right. I think they might be.
It's not capped. Like they do it in real time. So
it's not capped.
But like once a bike leaves the station, it's not if they flush it because of privacy concerns.
Got it.
Like because you could track somebody on their bike, so it's flushed because of privacy concerns. There is real time collected. So like, oh, there's a bike been gone for 48 hours. That's probably lost and stolen. So that's something to track down, but there's not like once it gets returned to the station, it's flushed.
Okay. Yeah. So right now we didn't use anything fancy, just the data on bike stations, how many bikes are available, and how many slots are available.
And there is some issues with the data. Apparently, that's been a recent issue is that it's not totally accurate. So,
you can't really help that.
You can ask Stephen about that if you want to know more. But apparently, they said no, it's accurate. It's just the times are wrong. So apparently, it's accurate, it just gives you the wrong times with the wrong data. So that's wrong to me.
But, should we switch? You want to just use your computer, Chris?
Yeah, we're doing that. I just
okay. The projector likes to do a hybrid.
We kind of had two goals for this presentation. The first is to kind of show you guys how we implemented the Divvy API, or was to show our app and the stuff that we're doing with that we think is really cool and fun. And the second was kind of my secret goal, which is to get all of you guys to start doing a little bit more iOS development. So I wanted to, hopefully you guys can play around with some APIs that we wrote to, in an iOS app to do some Divvy stuff. And a lot of you guys are web guys, but the frameworks are pretty similar between iOS and web development. So I'm just kind of stalling for time right now.
The projector very intelligently has to cool down before I can turn it back on.
Sure.
well, I took all of
Do you have a membership? Do you have a membership?
Here.
For Divvy?
Oh, for Divvy? No, we don't.
No, not yet.
I thought they were gonna.
Should be your
Good news, park bike stations are coming in this summer.
Yeah, we live on the south side, so they haven't quite spread out there yet.
I'll use them all the time once they're in Hyde Park. Really useful because it's not transportation from Hyde Park.
Also, you don't want to walk slowly in Hyde Park. So.
Are you speaking right?
Yeah.
Also, in addition to the iOS API, I'm working on a Python API for any Django or Flask developers.
There's actually already a bunch of, you can port one of the old bike share APIs in Python. There's actually already exposed.
Okay.
So I can show you where to get those.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Almost there, I promise. Oh, that's not neat.
I love the sound of my own voice, so it's like we're both just talking. We wrote a PowerPoint there.
Yeah.
We're bad at taglines, but we try. get from location A to location B with Divvy in the middle. So it's cool. So I'll go to the next slide.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So basically, problem solution. Divvy. When you find a Divvy trip, there's often a lot of you don't know which bike stations have bikes available and which bike stations have slots available. For example, one of my good friends just the other day rented a Divvy bike, and once you got to her destination, she had to wait for 15 minutes because there were no slots available on the Divvy bikes, and she couldn't really find out which ones around her had slots available. She actually got charged more because there were no slots for her to return her bike. So this is actually a big problem. It's getting bigger and bigger because more people are using the bikes. So this app helps to solve that problem by telling you which stations to take based on current availability.
Also, the other annoying thing is that you have to look up where the Divvy bike stations are, plan your walking route for the first one, figure out what the nearest one is to the location you're going to. So that requires opening multiple APIs and looking through multiple maps and stuff and figuring out what your route is. So unless you know where the Divvy stations are, it can be really annoying to figure out a Divvy route on the fly. So we kind of want to solve that problem. Yeah. So
here's some pictures of the app. Be nice. We've only been working on it for 2 weeks, but basically here it is. Pretty simple. You enter the start location, end location. We use some APIs to get so you can get some help with entering the address. The Apple API for this isn't perfect, but it's pretty good.
yeah.
Yeah.
And this is routing, as we talked about last week, to our favorite car, Duffy's.
Recommend you all go.
Yeah. $20
Some more example pictures.
What a corporate sponsor.
So when you put in the start and end location, it'll give you a group. So these markers are, so for example, this is the start location, the nearest Divvy bike station that has a bike available, and then this is the nearest Divvy bike station that has a bike spot available, and then your end destination. So the blue route, so the blue route is a walking route, and the green route is a biking route. So this biking route presumably gives you the best bike route based on bike paths. Oftentimes it'll take you'll see it go to the Lakeshore path. We use the Google Maps API to do all the routing.
Because they're the only ones with the biking routing thing. So the Apple Maps doesn't have biking, so we have to figure out how to route that, which we'll talk about later.
Oh, stop. Sorry.
This is where we're eating.
Keep going. So we also have turn by turn. It's pretty good for walking. For biking, the Google Maps API turn by turn isn't great. Sometimes it just says turn right, turn left, but on a bike path there's no streets really, so sometimes it gets confusing. But we also don't expect people to use it while they're biking. It's probably a bad idea. But we presented both just so it's there.
And then there's also weird things that the Google API throws in here. So you see turn right on the North Cliff, your destination will be on the left, just kind of throws it all together as one string, so we kind of have to parse that out.
So some more work needs to be done, but it's all here. And so if you on the app, you scroll down and you see first walking route, biking route, and then the second walking route from the last bike station to your destination.
Okay, so we're going to go through some technical details. If you get too bored, just use this hand gesture to indicate you're bored. If you're really bored, just put your head down, and then if half the group's heads are down, then I'll stop. So the first one, so we basically built a few APIs that are now on GitHub for you to use. This is the link. It's at the end again. It's also on the Google Doc that Steven manages. But so basically, the first one is a Divvy Data Access API. Basically, this is a wrapper class to handle all the requests to the Divvy API server, and then return in something that's useful for you to use in Objective-C. The other is the Google Bike Route, which is a little bit of a misnomer because you can also, with the Google Bike Route, get car routes and transit routes and walking routes. But we write this to kind of also, once again, kind of wrap over the Google server call requests and stuff and make it really easy for you guys to try and get some bike requests and get the routes back. So I'm just going to go through how to use these APIs and some kind of basic iOS things that you have to, larger iOS concepts that are kind of more advanced so that people who are familiar with model view controller and those sorts of web development things can kind of figure this out when they're getting into iOS. So I'll go to the next slide. So there's three like features that are kind of those sorts of features that are more advanced. One is asynchronous request, the second is delegation, and the third are station objects, which is a wrapper class that we wrote. So I'll go to the next one. So asynchronous requests are basically if you're making a request to. So there's this concept of threading, which is that computers can execute multiple things at the same time on different threads. So some threads are in the background and some threads are in the foreground. The foreground thread is the main thread in iOS, and that thread is where all execution happens, including calls that draw the user interface onto the screen. So the issue is, so let's say you make a request to a server, and the server takes a while to respond because it's going over internet connection, grabbing data for you, and blah, blah, blah. And it takes, let's say, 5 seconds to get the data. Well, if you're doing this on the main thread, then the entire user interface freezes. So you can't see, so you can't interact with the screen at all, and that's really bad user experience, really bad UI. So what you do is you put in an asynchronous thread, and an asynchronous thread kind of does it under the hood. So in between running your user interface request, it will send a request to the server. So this implements asynchronous requests so that you never have to deal with the fact that your thread or your screen could freeze up. So let's go to the next slide. So delegation is a common paradigm in iOS. And basically the idea is an event occurs and you want something else to handle it. So let's say you tap the screen and a button, well you want a different part of the computer program to handle the button getting pressed. So that's delegating what that button does. So basically, how do you handle something that happens asynchronously if it's not happening on the main thread? Well, you have to send a message to the main thread from the asynchronous thread, and that main thread handles it. So you need to send it to some part of the computer program that handles it, which is normally just a really simple like function, right? So you define a function, you say perform this function when this is done. Basically, is essentially what I'm doing under the hood here. But that's all handled for you. So, and so there's these delegate methods. So essentially, these get called when the asynchronous thread's complete. And sorry, I know it's kind of out there, but this is how you kind of use this API. Is that when the asynchronous fill request is complete, it returns the data, which is this variable right here, and you just implement this method, right? So it assumes that you have a delegate that's doing. You just implement that method there. And then there's request filled with error if there's an error. And this is just response to this filled data access, fill station data asynchronously. The other cool thing about this method that's really easy to use is, let's say you create a data access object. For people that are familiar, you can basically there's two properties on it. So you just go, once you call this method, you can just go and you have an object. You can just go data access object dot station list, and it will return the list of stations as station objects. Or you can do station data, and it will return as a dictionary. So or an array. So let's go to the next one. The other ones is device. These are different delegate methods. This is the use one nearest station device found with station. It returns the station that's nearest to the device, and then from device location. So with options. And those three options are the nearest station that has any bikes, or could be open, could not be open, or the one that's open, i.e. you could put a bike into it, or one that has a bike available. So those are kind of the three options you can do that, and you just call this method, and then these two things naturally get called when this information is available, and you just implement that.
Quick note, for those not familiar with iOS development, you might be appalled with these really, really long names, and that's okay in iOS development because Xcode sort of fills them in for you, so just out there.
You can press it, once you write JR, it will fill it out for you. You press tab, and it's gone, right? So it's pretty simple, it's pretty beautiful.
Yeah.
So those are the delegate methods. And then one more thing about this class, so you want to go to the next slide, is that it has these station objects. I spelled wrapper wrong, I guess. But the idea is that it's a simple wrapper,
Let's just shout out to Dr. Genius again.
Yeah, I've been listening to 90s on 9 on that. I guess that's been affecting me. Probably was better back then. Anyway, so yeah, so you can go. Normally, you kind of do a dictionary the same way you kind of would in this at thing's a special way that you indicate a string in iOS development. But normally, you just grab information from a dictionary the same way you would in, let's say, Python or something, right? Where you just put it brackets like that. But this makes it a little easier, more object-oriented. So if you have a station object, then you kind of just go dot location, and you can grab the location from that and just returns that value for you automatically. You don't have to think about it. So this is a little bit cleaner. So yeah, so that's kind of that's kind of the Divvy Data Access API. You guys can open that up, and I have really in-depth explanations on the thing on how to use it, but I kind of just want to give you guys an overview of that. So let's go to the next. So this one's really simple. There's only a few steps that you need. I keep saying really simple, but anyway. So one, you allocate a route object with an array of waypoint strings, and those are just like parentheses with like, the 1 to 2 latitude lines. And then you indicate if you're using a GPS, and then you set delegate to the view controller that handles the Google Map. So that's the view controllers are these things that basically handle the presentation of information in iOS. So you can have like, a map, and you need something that's kind of controlling that map and interpreting and putting information into it. And then you just go with transportation type from that object, and you implement these in the delegate, which is route with polyline, and polyline's how they draw the route on there. And then you use directions from server, and this is just the actual data in dictionary form or random objective-C data. Then to draw a route in the delegate method, you just do polyline.map equals the map view that you do there. It's pretty simple. And then at that point, you can draw a route on. And these options involve public transit, walking, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that with here, the transportation object, all of that you can just grab pretty easily. So that way you can just say option, bike route, and it'll return the bike route. From Google, you do option walking, and it'll return the walking, and you just implement these methods, and you can just put it there. So it's pretty simple. Yeah, so you can go next. I was going to show you guys a sample use case of this API in GitHub, but you guys can just go to GitHub if that'd be helpful. But I feel like I've already been talking too long about this stuff. But like, do you want me to?
No, I mean, so I guess when we're talking, I guess I'm going to put my Juan hat on for a moment, for those of you guys who know how Juan likes in your seat and these kinds of things. So I guess maybe not a lot of you are familiar with what we're talking about as far as the concept of object-oriented programming. That's really kind of one of the key pieces to this thing. We're talking about asking sort of this idea, like this function, to give us something back, and the thing that it's giving us back is this object. And so in that case, I guess you had an example of, could you maybe go back a slide, Christopher? We can just really quickly look at that. Like for the example, like polyline, right? So when he says polyline.map, polyline's an object, and there's a value, a variable inside called map, they've defined. That's got some information in it. So you're basically asking for this data, and it's coming back in sort of this little package that has some different attributes, and those attributes then you can access and get this different information. So I know it's a little bit like complicated sounding, but that's the basic concept, and that's how you would interact with this API. You basically get this this little GitHub repo, and you would download it to your computer, and then you would start like trying to ask it for data, and it would return you these objects. And you use those objects in your own.
Right, that's exactly right. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So, and you guys.
So continuing the one hat question type things, why is this important to have?
the object.
Oh, man, right.
So the nice thing about object-oriented programming is that you can handle a lot of, so you can have a request that's really complicated, like do a method call that's really complicated, because a lot of things come under the hood. So the idea is that I'm implementing a lot of things that I'm hiding from you, and you don't have to think about it all. And that's all wrapped into the data that's stored in these little objects that are happening here.
Anybody know what word that is to describe that?
Okay.
I would say abstraction.
Abstraction.
There you go, right? It's like, I don't care how you get it, just give me the thing I want, and it's up to you guys. Like, all that magic happens in this little black box, right? I don't really care, right? That's how you can think about it.
Yeah.
Can I further derail you?
Derail.
A number of people said that they were learning programming. So the question that might be really nice for you to answer is, what non-device specific programming experience did you have that got you closest to this kind of object-oriented, you requesting data from remote servers asynchronously, wrapping it in, like somebody doing JavaScript in a web browser or something like?
So
what would you suggest people learn that's not iOS specific?
So I have a really bad answer to this question, which is the first language I learned was Objective-C. And then but if anyone does want to take that approach and they want to learn iOS development and think it's really cool, I have a list of the resources I learned to teach myself, and I'm willing to work with anyone to kind of go through this stuff. So, just send me an email. I'm going to put my email at the end, and email me, and we can start, from scratch. And that's kind of how I view teaching yourself programming, because I'm basically totally self-taught, is that you should kind of just find projects you're passionate about and build them out. So like the reason I started doing asynchronous requests is I was like, well, in the modern era, you need to do everything through a database and have real-time communication between different people. I need to know how servers work in order to do that. So I started reading about servers. And then I'm like, well, in order to access servers, how do I do that from iOS? And then that was how I went from there.
I mean, you do raise a good point about learning this stuff for the first time. I think maybe in the beginning you might feel like you're being pulled in a lot of different directions, like, oh, this language can let me do this, but this person's doing this thing in this language. I would really strongly pair what these guys are saying and pick one, and pick pick one that is helps you get a project done that you actually care about, and actually try to struggle through getting that project that you care about done, right? And it really actually makes the process a lot more enjoyable if you have something to show for it in the end, as opposed to so you take like a programming class that might like give you like an abstract lesson to learn, like program tic-tac-toe. Well, that's not really fun. I personally think that it's a lot more motivating. I mean, some people might think it's fun, all right, but I don't think it's fun. And I mean, you're here for a reason, right? You care about open government data, you care about maybe civic virtue, all that stuff. Pick something in this realm that you're excited about and focus on that and learn to program through that. Is really that's would be my advice for people starting out.
So going back to not to like shortchange that advice, because that seems like super great advice. But so going back to what you guys are talking about your app, just a question about it.
Yeah.
Does it so you can really only can take a Divvy bike for longer than half an hour, but does this account for stopping at other stations along the way if your route is going to be over a half hour?
Yeah, we're going to talk about this in the next slide. Is that actually? There we go. It's a good time. I'll just leave this now. It's a good transition. Your question's right. I'll start with this. So one feature we're going to implement called surfing. So basically, the deal with Divvy bikes is the first half an hour is free, but then after that they start charging you. But you could sort of game the system and ride a bike half an hour to a Divvy bike station and then change bikes and hop and keep hopping so you don't have to pay. Basically, as long as you return it every half an hour, it'll be free. So what feature of the app you're kind of thinking about? Sorry?
With the membership, right?
With the membership, right? Yeah. If you sign up online for membership, that's the deal. So we thought it's kind of a cool idea to implement. How can you get from A to B without paying anything? So that's something that definitely on the list of things to implement. Something else, the first thing.
We thought there was a clear economic statement there, so we'll save you $2 on this trip and you pay us $1 to save it. Why not make that a premium?
First thing is, say you're biking and maybe you got the directions, the bike station was free, had slots available, and while you're biking maybe it filled up. Well, you want to sort of give you an alert, maybe a push notification saying, whoops, the bike station we routed you to is now full. Here's the nearest next station you should try to go to. It's probably next on the list. We want to compare other route options, so you can get walking, public transit, driving, all in one page, so you can sort of compare all your options. And then also, we need some better UI UX. That's not our specialty. So we're looking for designers, front-end guys who want to help us with that.
Anyone's interested, definitely send us an email, which, if you want to send us an email, the next slide, these are our emails. So, just our names at bglconsulting.com.
Could you read it out?
So Adam at bglconsulting.com, Andrew at bglconsulting.com, and then this is a link to the GitHub again. And if you want to see, if you want to see how to actually implement things, go press View Controller in there.
Can you read it out?
Read out what?
The URL.
Oh, the URL. Okay, www.github.com/AdamGluck/Divvy API.
All be in the blog post, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll put that. The links will
Yeah.
Cool.